Tanchjim 1, the latest budget bullet type IM from Tanchjim. And in fact, they has been quite well known for producing bullet type IM all the way from this, I think the first one being Tanchjim Tanya, and then followed by this very popular Tanchjim Zero, and now we have Tanchjim 1. So let's just have a look at this Tanchjim 1. How much does it cost? If you were to check on AliExpress and here, for example, from Hi-Fi Go, this Tanchjim 1, which I have in my hand right now, is the basic model, which is priced at 21 US dollar. And you may also see that the price goes all the way up to 28 US dollar. That is because some of the models being offered for this Tanchjim 1 being DSP, which means that it has a dedicated DAC or dongle attached to it permanently. And you also have a slightly different price Tanchjim 1 having microphone attached to it. But the one that I have right now is the basic model. So just bear in mind, the entirety of my review will be based on the basic 3.5mm single-ended model. Alright, so let's just have a look at the configuration itself. See here, okay, like I mentioned, this is yet another bullet type IEM, fatty type bullet IEM. The construction of the material itself is just, as you can see here, made of a combination of aluminum shell together with plastic inner side. One improvement over the previous iteration of the IEM which they have released being detachable. You see here? There, right? So this is definitely something which Tanchjim has listened to the market. People would say that, you know, how they wish that this Tanchjim Tanya or even Zero having detachable cable. There you have it. Okay, but I'd like to note that if you look at the cavity of this Tanchjim 1, you can't just simply attach any 2-pin cable into it because it is quite recessed. So it goes deep inside. The cable itself here, right, it is very narrow. So you can use this cable to any other IM, even QDC IM, because it is very narrow, but you cannot just simply attach most other 2-pin cable here unless they are thin like this. Okay, just bear that in mind. Okay, let me just attach this back. And then looking at the what's inside, this is a 10mm dynamic driver constructed of metallic titanium dome with PU and PEEK composite, kind of a bit exotic. In contrast, compared to the last iteration of this bullet IM from Tanchjim, which is Zero, this is DMT4. So despite the size, the dimension, and the construction itself pretty much, you know, suggesting similarity, but they are in fact different inside. Okay, and you look at the impedance rating. If you were to check the internet, you would come across some sites saying 18 ohm, even some site saying 32 ohm. So which one is it? And I have decided to measure it for myself using my multimeter, and the result I got was 21 ohm. So essentially this is very easy to drive in comparison to this Tanchjim Zero, which is rated at 32 ohm. Okay, and the sensitivity is at 126 dB. So this is very easy to drive. This is the most sensitive IM among all three of them, even higher than Tanchjim Tanya, which is rated somewhere close to that, but not as sensitive as this. And Tanchjim Zero is even lesser. Okay, the cable itself, I already mentioned just now, it is pretty much standard affair from Tanchjim, similar construction, except that it is now detachable. And you have here, just like standard issue of Tanchjim, which is this basic budget model, it comes with these two type of tips, which is the standard one being attached to it, being the narrow bore type and the wide bore type. I will explain a bit more on this in the sound segment, how does they differ, because the tip does change the sound output. And I also, as usual, has been using quite a lot of this foam tip, which is my own foam tip, Canon foam tip. So I will explain also on that, the sound differences. And looking at the rest of it, is pretty much, again, very simple affair for a budget IM. Let's just have a look at the tuning itself first. I got it from Tanchjim directly. This is in fact Tanchjim 1 DSP. I have been trying to get Tanchjim 1 itself from the official source, wasn't able to get it, but to my understanding, it should not differ too much because the DSP is just simply, meant to tune it slightly different, especially on the lower frequency. But if you look at it, this is something which I would consider as being anywhere between Harman to V sort of sound tuning, with pronounced boosting in the lower frequency, okay, and some boosting in the upper frequency, especially between the 3K region there, okay, and it start to subside all the way to 10K region. And for the sake of comparison, again, you can see there I also included Tanchjim Zero, and this is one of the reasons that I love Tanchjim Zero so very much, because if you look at that graph, it is pretty much identical to this ATOMOS ER2 XR, which I have grown to love for a very long time. I have been using this for many years. Moving on to the subject of sound. Before I proceed any further, I just like to clarify that it is very difficult for me to proceed without drawing comparison against this all-time favorite of mine, which is Tanchjim Zero here. Okay, and if you have been following me for the last 1 year, you probably know that how much I love this illegally good Tanchjim Zero. And I would also draw comparison against Tanchjim Tanya, which I believe so many people have there in possession, so that they get an idea where does this Tanchjim one looks like, or how does it position between all of them. So let's just proceed with it. And on the screen right now, some of the notes which I have jotted down, starting with power itself. Like I mentioned earlier, driving this Tanchjim one is very easy. In fact, when attached to my Sony phone here, which is well under 1 VRMS, very weak source, directly to this 3.5 mm port, right? I was already able to use it, properly. It was already rich sounding, full sounding, and definitely I do not feel that anything is missing there. But does it scale better with more power? Yes, of course. I use this Sony PCM D100 here, my favorite depth. And of course, I also use frequently with this Hebe FC6 2 VRMS and 4 VRMS of Centron TechPort HD here, and also iBasso DC04 Pro 4 VRMS at 240 milliwatt of power. However, I would like to note that if you look at the comparison of the note here, I did mention that it is efficient to drive because of that high sensitivity, but it may appear shouty or kind of a bit stressed when attached to something a lot more powerful, like this Burson Audio Playmate 2. This thing, Class A amplifier, emit in excess of 3000 milliwatt of power. That's really crazy. So when attached to something like that powerful, this Tanchjim one exhibit kind of like a bit of, shoutiness to the sound. I must tune down the loudness, the volume, all the way to 2 or even 1, right, in order to make it listenable. So I would say that if you were to attach this Tanchjim one to something similarly powerful like, i5 Diablo, another crazily powerful DAC amp, you probably have the same result. And probably the same thing also if you attach it to something which is, obscenely loud like this VE Megatron. This Tanchjim one is designed to be easily, casually attached to anything which is readily available, not meant for critical listening on highly powerful device like this, okay? And in contrast, Tanchjim Tanya, right, in fact, was able to scale a bit better than Tanchjim one. Okay, it will actually behave a bit better when attached to this crazily powerful DAC amp. And of course, Tanchjim Zero, one of the reasons that I love it so much is that because the higher the power, the better it sounds like. Because I believe Tanchjim Zero, the construction of the material itself, with the included higher impedance rating, okay, it will scale really well the higher the power goes, and you would hear that the sound opens up, the dynamic gets richer and everything, and it does not get shouty at all. In fact, it behaves like a magnetic planar. So that's pretty much on the power aspect. So as for the rest of it, you can actually pause the screen and look at it. So when it comes to note weight, this Tanchjim one is something which I would consider as fairly rich. It does not sound lean, or neither it is sounding, particularly boosted to sound rich. And in contrast, compared with Tanchjim Tanya, definitely among all three of them, Tanchjim Tanya is the one that sounds richer. When it comes to resolution, okay, the good thing about this Tanchjim one is that you can expect very good quality of analytical and transparent resolution. But less analytical and less, more musical, in fact, for Tanchjim Tanya. It is not focused on being analytical. But the difference between Tanchjim Zero and Tanchjim One is pretty much, if you don't compare side by side, you probably would not notice it. So in defense of this Tanchjim One, it is already very analytical on its own, just that you don't start comparing it with Tanchjim Zero, okay? And dynamic energy, all right. This is one very well tuned when it comes to dynamic energy. It is very well balanced, in fact. Energetic, yet never offensive. So it does not sound overly euphonic. And when we move on to Tanchjim Tanya, it is energetic, it is colored and vibrant. Like I mentioned earlier, the warmest among all of three. And one of the reasons that I love Tanchjim Zero so much is that it is energetic, it is springy and vibrant. So the word here is springy. Let's talk about the dynamic itself, looking at the upper frequency. Okay, one thing that I like about this Tanchjim One is that it exhibits very good and crisp extension. So what I'm trying to say is that the decay state of it, it is very clean, well resolved. It has pretty much a really good sparkle and energy to the upper frequency itself. When it comes to Tanchjim Tanya, this is not meant for treble head, okay? If you love treble, probably you would not like Tanchjim Tanya so much. It is more for people who are a bit more sensitive to treble. So it is definitely subdued and roll off in the upper frequency. And Tanchjim Zero, on the other hand, it has quite a lot of air and sparkle and energy on the upper frequency. So probably people who are treble sensitive would even say that this Tanchjim Zero is the brightest among all three of them. Okay. When it comes to mid-range, one of the key thing about this Tanchjim One is that it is neutral. Slightly recessed with the presentation itself due to the V tuning, but I feel that the good thing about this is that if you want something which is faithful and transparent to the source, Tanchjim One has it. It is neutral, does not have any kind of warming or let's say dry effect to the mid-range itself. Whereas Tanchjim Tanya is very colored. This is especially on the lower mid-range. And I would even say that, especially if you listen to female vocal, you can feel that the vocal is warm, okay? And whereas Tanchjim Zero, again, it is neutral, pretty much similar to Tanchjim One, but if I'm not comparing between Tanchjim Zero and Tanchjim One, I would say that they are pretty much on equal terms. So let's talk about the low frequency now, okay? And perhaps this is one of the reasons that you would want to have Tanchjim One. This thing out of the box, in fact, was so bassy to a point that I almost took it out from my ear. Yes, I don't like it because it was attached to this narrow bow nozzle, right? I was, already hoping that for the next iteration or the next generation of bullet type IEM coming from Tanchjim, that they would actually take care of the bass, not to add bass, but instead it's the other way around. This is now something which I consider as a bass head IM. If you ever use Tanchjim Zero and if you feel that it lacks bass, this is the answer for it, Tanchjim One, okay? And use this narrow bow tip. This is another very basic IM as well. But the focus of this Tanchjim Tanya is more towards a Harman type of bass, which means that the mid bass is not that so dominant, more on the sub bass, whereas Tanchjim One exhibit a bit better balance between sub bass and mid bass. And Tanchjim Zero, my baby here, right? One of the reasons that I love it so much because it exhibits pretty much similar kind of bass presentation to ATOMOS ER2XR. I enjoy it, but for some people perhaps not too much bass for their enjoyment. So you can go for this Tanchjim One or Tanchjim Tanya. All right. Now let's talk about the technical aspect of it. The most prominent thing about technical aspect is sound stage. So I would say that, this Tanchjim One, just like Tanchjim Zero, is fairly wide open. And Tanchjim Tanya here, definitely not as wide, or in fact, I would even call it narrow if compared to the other two. It is tall but narrow. And the most open sounding is in fact still Tanchjim Zero. One of the reasons that I love it so much because when I attach it to my ear, it feels like I am listening to earbud rather than IEM. Okay. When it comes to spatial staging between Tanchjim Zero and Tanchjim One, it's pretty much equal. Very holographic, suitable for gaming even, but can't say the same for this Tanchjim Tanya. It is just fairly holographic, meaning that if you play binaural music, you're going to feel that it is like lacking in the sense of precision and resolution when it comes to locating instrument. So between 0 and 1, they're pretty much equal on that subject. Now that I have shown you some of the details pertaining the comparison between the three of them, let me just show you this, the last one. Okay, this is how the rating for all of those IEM which I have mentioned earlier, based on Andy Odervog rating system. And I'd like to remind you, I am so very biased towards this Tanchjim Zero. Let me just, be upfront on it. My love for Tanchjim Zero is definitely something people would consider as very biased. But then again, this is my perception, this is my perspective. So this is how it looked like for Tanchjim 1 when compared against the rest of the competition. Just remember this. This is a bit more suited for people who love thick and dense lower frequency. In short, if you're a bass head and if you listen to Tanchjim Zero and you wish there's a bit more bass to it, Tanchjim 1 is the answer.